Hey, Soren, what's up, man?
Not a
Soren,
whole
that
lot.
means Michelle must have come over for dinner.
Soren just put away over $120 worth of sushi.
Really good man. Way to go, Soren. Anybody that makes a dent in the Churchill billions is a good man by me. Let me ask you a question, Jack. Before Soren comes over for dinner, do you
Yes.
have to make a call to Goldmine Sachs or no?
I do. I have to transfer some funds into cash.
My father went to the River Cafe to the bar one time. The guy says, "Would you like another drink?" He says, "No, my bank isn't open yet." Apparently, it was expensive. It was an expensive venture, yeah. So, Jack,
Yeah.
oh my God, so much in the news, Jack. So much in the news. Jack, do you remember this picture of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip?
I don't remember specifically the picture, but talk to me.
Now, she's laughing hysterically, and he's standing there with a Busby hat on. And the headline after Prince Philip passed away at the ripe old age of 502, the headline was, this is Prince Philip playing a practical joke on Queen Elizabeth. Oh, the fun times they had, Jack. The fun times they had. What a couple of giggles in this private moment. I put this here to raise an interesting point. People get images on the internet and they make up whatever kind of story they want to make up. This actually is a much more interesting story. Prince Philip is a member of that order that wears that little outfit there. But the reason they're laughing is that they were an outdoor event and the guests were besieged by a colony of bees. And everybody in the garden is waving the bees away from themselves. And the queen thought that was funny. So that's why they're having a private chuckle to themselves. But the picture was largely mislabeled and misattributed. People thought that he borrowed this costume and surprised her in the halls of Buckingham Palace. Not at all the case.
Fake news has been around for a long time, Seth.
Yeah. Well, you and I wanted to talk about delusion today.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk about this really is the age of delusion.
It is. We thought it was the age of Aquarius. That was about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, so 40. Yes, this is the age of delusion. And I think that's extremely perceptive because that's exactly what it is.
It's funny, isn't it, Jack? Like, despite the fact that we live in an age where there's more information available to more people than at any other point in time, that now is the time where people are the most deluded. Specifically, we're talking about the 35% of Americans that would report that Donald Trump is the legitimate president of the United States of America. It's like they live in their own personal information bubble, and they have a inability to process any information beyond the selected pipelines of information that they embrace, which are demonstrably false, right? But I wanted to ask you this question as a useful kickoff point for the show today. Jack, do you think that the definition of delusional behavior is, in this age of multi-information channels, do you think that the definition of delusion has changed to refusing information?
Very much so. And I think that that's obviously a result of the number of information streams that everybody is a target of now, that there has to be one, you're going to need intellectual defense mechanisms. Just like you would against any kind of physical disease or mental disease, you build up defense mechanisms, and those these days have to be much more sophisticated than they used to be, just because of the information streams.
What does that look like to you? I mean, what? How do you see those defense mechanisms manifesting themselves in the demographic we're talking about?
An extremely complex, brutal kind of, boy, what's the best word to I mean, whenever, let's take it apart. Whenever you need to double, quadruple, times 10, times 20, your number of defense mechanisms against different streams, it makes you into a screaming neurotic. So really, what we're seeing is informational neurotics, Seth.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to kind of turn the show into, what kind of useful strategies can we share with viewers that help start to fill, because, for lack of a better word, buddy, we're activists here. We're activists. We're challenging a structure in our society. We're confronting it head on, honestly, aggressively, with humor and thought. And that's what we're doing here. We're sitting on the porch and we're trying to arm ourselves against an enemy, which is threatening everything that we hold dear. So wanted to share, some tools. We can start to build a toolbox. Mm-hmm. And one of the tools that I thought we'd start with is, let's develop some working definitions so that we can all maybe speak the same language about this threat and about what it really is. Because, anybody who's read Sun Tzu says, if you know understands that if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you'll never lose in 1,000 battles. We're going to battle. And so let's arm ourselves by knowing our enemy. And so a handy little tour of an information stream called WebMD, Jack. WebMD gives us a very healthy few paragraphs on delusion and delusional disorder. Would you indulge me?
Let me just throw a caveat in here. I read that, Seth. You sent it to me. What I realized about WebMD, it's a wonderful collection of information for people who don't want to go too deep.
That's exactly what I thought.
I'm glad you did, because when they start to say that there are certain behavioral forms that encompass all these other delusion.
You saw that, huh?
Yes. And a lot of them are, in fact, based on totally different things than the sociological delusion of the Republican Party, the groupthink. And unfortunately, once you put them all under one category, it tends to make understanding them more difficult because they're extremely different. What you and I are interested in now, and having read that article, is what I would refer to as a social delusion. Okay,
right. So only like there would be five useful working definitions. Only 5 working definitions. Only one of those definitions applies to the social delusion that we're finding now. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's if you would indulge me, let's maybe read a part and then go back and forth, and then I'll just go to highlighted parts. Delusional disorder, previously called paranoid disorder,
which is so wrong.
Well, yeah.
Paranoid is just one small part of delusional behavior.
I get it. So it's categorizing it. Is a type of serious mental illness called a psychotic disorder. People who have it can't tell what's real from what's imagined. So I just want to take a little break here. And I want to talk about what's real and what's imagined, okay? So today was a pretty important day in the news. Today we had a vote in the Senate about a bipartisan commission to investigate January 6th insurrection. And if there was ever a truth versus fiction moment in the narrative of the modern 21st century American. It's January 6th and what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an argument. What actually happened is Donald Trump incited his followers. He invited and then incited his followers in what is demonstrably a planned attack where his co-conspirators gave tours to the perpetrators of this crime of the American Capitol the day before in a planned attack. And in this case, we're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Jungle Jim Jordan,
Right.
the guy from Texas, Gomert. We're talking about a number of co-conspirators who are very high-profile people in the United States Congress.
How did the vote go, by the way? I wasn't watching the news.
6 Republicans voted for, the rest voted against. So tonight, news, we're going to have a Democratic commission, which is run by the Democrats in Congress. It'll be probably announced over the weekend or early next week. So
let's do this, Seth, and I don't want to interrupt you, but it's
please
important to me whenever something like this comes up to look at immediately motivation of the GOP.
Right.
In not voting for this. What is the motivation?
The motivation is 2020. The motivation is we want to get this off the table before 2020, and they know that they can't, so they have to at least be able to paint it as a partisan effort. Unlike Benghazi, by the way. But where Benghazi did damage to Hillary Clinton.
Did she make them look stupid or what?
To a collection of stupid people, it doesn't really matter, which brings me to roundabout to my point that I wanted to get to, talking about delusion, okay? We know what happened January 6th. We are not so cowardly that we're not going to put the pieces together.
Say hello to Noel.
Right? So, I'm watching CNN tonight, and the coverage, quite rightly, is about the lead story of the day, the attack on American democracy, and the continued refusal of Republicans to address it. They want to make it go away. It's cowardly, it's calculated, and as Lisa Murkowski said, it is entirely about power and the 2020 midterms, not about our democracy. And that is a disgrace. So that is what was going on at 5:45 this afternoon. I tune in to Fox News. At 5:45 on Fox News, my hand to God, Black people exchanging gunfire in New York City. And the headline topic was, defund the police?
Oh boy. Okay, delusion.
Race baiting, delusion, playing to fear.
Yes.
And on a global scale, paranoia, right? We were just talking about paranoia. Mm-hmm. Conditioned paranoia and delusion is what low information voters are suffering from. And so when we read that delusions are the main symptom of delusional disorder, they're unshakable beliefs in something that isn't true or based on reality, but that doesn't mean that they're completely unrealistic. That is to say, were there Black people exchanging gunfire in New York City? Yes, there were. Is there a reason that Fox News chose to lead with that story and go with it at 5 o'clock while the real news is happening in the background? Yes, it was. And this pattern of behavior from the abuser to the abused is creating a culture of delusional behavior. The delusional disorder involves delusions that aren't bizarre, having to do with situations that could happen in real life, like being followed, poisoned, deceived, conspired against, or loved from a distance, These delusions usually involve mistaken perceptions or experiences, but in reality, read here truth, the situations are either not true at all or highly exaggerated. Right?
Didn't you say the other day that you didn't know anybody who had committed suicide by Novichok?
Yeah. Yeah. The Institute for the National Institute of Mental Health has reported exactly 0 suicides by Novichok. I'm looking at you, Alan Weisselberg.
Thinking you're going to be the first one on the board.
You're number one on the Soviet hit parade, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm so proud. I'm so proud, Jack. I posted Alan Weisselberg didn't kill himself. First, I'm the first one. And now we lost Jack. I wonder how that happened. I wonder how we lost Jack. I wonder if he's going to realize that we lost him. He probably is looking at a screen now and saying, "Oh shit, freaking signal fell off." Should I call him? Let's call him. Let's text him first. While I'm texting, I'm sure. Oh, here he is again. Hold on a sec. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. We'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty.
I got one of those today. It was from Al's.
Just one? Lucky you.
No, but this was from Al's Head.
No, it's a clone number, Bubala.
Oh, is that what it is, Bubala?
It's a clone number. They get some dead blue-haired lady, and she's been dead for 3 years, but her phone number is still live because she paid 5 years into the future because she knew she was going to lose her brain.
Novichok, another death in Al's Head.
Hey, what's up, Noel? What's up, man? How are you, buddy?
Hey, Noel.
Haul ass, no brakes. Hey, man. Noel is hanging out. I love Noel. He's great. We're also joined by Ben Bryant tonight.
Oh, great. But you know what we say in Maine? We say, driver like you stole her.
Driver like you stole a beggar. So, what kinds of delusional disorders and types are there, Jack? Well, there's erotomanic, where, you believe somebody's in love with you. Grandiose, that's me. I have the overinflated sense of self-worth.
We all agree.
Jealousy, right?
Yeah. No.
And then
Ben agrees.
Then here's the one that's important, Jack. Persecutory, Jack. Someone who has this believes they or someone close to them are being mistreated, Jack.
Yes.
Or that someone is spying on them or planning to harm them, like taking their white privilege away.
Now,
they may make reported complaints to legal authorities, like the President of the United States and vice versa. I'm hearing from very many people that. Sound familiar?
Open the phones, he says. With the phone door open on the internet. I don't know.
Right.
We don't want too many crank callers. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to call in the other day, and we had to block the call. I mean, there are dangers in doing this job. Seth.
Hey, buddy, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel that my new nickname for Marjorie Taylor Greene, that I'm going to lay on you in just 1 second, is too harsh? Because I didn't get the kind of positive feedback and love that I thought I would. The Georgia lot lizard.
I love it. I must have missed it because
I know, but Georgia lot lizard, a lot lizard is a truck stop hooker.
Yes. Of course.
Right. But do you think that lot lizard is lost on, do you think that lot lizard is lost on the people in the Northeast? Because we don't have the information of lot lizards?
It's a trucker expression. Okay. So, yes, it's lost on a lot of people. My feeling about her was she looks like somebody hit her in the face with a shovel, But I think, Seth, when you're talking about delusionment, I think it's because I always wanted to hit her in the face with a shovel. She may not look like it.
I thought to myself, I wanted to take her out on the ice floe and club her like a baby harp seal.
Too good for her.
And wear her skin as a jacket.
I like that. I like
something along those lines. And then I saw her workout routine, and she's very conscious of her own physical form, right? Because her face looks like she's Cro-Magnon.
It does. You saw that Facebook post about that, because she really does look like what Cro-Magnon woman looked like after she was hit with a club. And it was an uppercut. It wasn't on the top of the head from the back. Somebody put an uppercut.
She looks like if Ernest Borgnine had a daughter.
She is a true skank, isn't she?
Holy shit. But I mean, the shape of her face, and like I'm one to talk, but and then the other day she's on this desperation tour.
Yes, with
she and Matt Gaetz are just diving to the bottom of the barrel,
Yep.
And they're not even couching their racism in any kind of code, like I don't know, Reagan did.
What they're doing is they're trying to out-racist each other. It's almost like a traveling competition.
Isn't it great, though?
Oh, I love it.
But it's funny because in this information rage, there's no real outrage machine.
No.
It's like CNN has been so outraged for so long, and MSNBC has been so outraged for so long that they're all like, it sounds tinny now. And we have a president who wants to play nice, and we have Joe Manchin who wants to play nice and leverage his position in the Senate. We have a dysfunctional. We have a majority leader who I've known for 3 fucking decades. I've known Chuck Schumer. He spoke at every one of my wife's graduations, from grade school to high school.
That was his only thing, Seth.
Chuck, dude, I got to tell you, I was an advocate for Chuck, and I was an adversary for Chuck. I've had conversations with him in elevators and in person, and I know people on his staff. Chuck can do this. Chuck can grow a set of balls, but he's operating as if his hands are tied around his balls. And this is not the time for that. I mean, Joe Manchin is acting as if he's a majority leader.
Okay, let's cut to the white shot. Cut to the white shot, Seth. What Trump has successfully done is he has made most Americans he has made them into entities that believe a tiny percentage of what they see and hear. And that's the big picture. How is that going to affect the voting public?
I think that we can talk about, let's talk about some real numbers, okay? So let's talk about real numbers in a poll done by, YouTube? Not YouTube, in a poll done by Yahoo News, okay? So it's pretty grainy, but let's show it. Americans blame Republicans for the attack on the Capitol, while Republicans blame left-wing protesters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the breakdown. And on the top level, you can see Republicans are in red, Democrats are in blue. There's no surprise there. Independents are green, and all U.S. adults are in purple. So the question is, Trump supporters who gathered at the Capitol, at the U.S. Capitol, 41% of Republicans think it was Trump supporters who gathered at the U.S. Capitol. 85 or 87% of Democrats believe it was Trump supporters who gathered at the Capitol. Here's the interesting part. Between 63 and 65% of independents and all U.S. adults think it was Trump supporters. So now you can see very clearly there's about 35% of people, who are kind of in the middle on this. it was Republicans who claimed the election had been stolen, right?
Mm-hmm.
35% of Republicans, 80% of Democrats. President Donald Trump is responsible for the attack. 21% or 22% of Republicans believe that Trump is responsible for the attack. 21% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump is responsible for the attack, or 23%. That means that 76% of Republicans in the United States think that somebody else was responsible for the attack on the Capitol building.
Mm-hmm.
And then left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad were responsible. 73% of Republicans believe that. Now, I'm going to ask you, Jack, what kind of behavior would you call that?
I would call that a collective delusion.
So if we ask, what are the causes and risk factors of delusional behavior? WebMD tells us that some are genetic, some are biological, but others are environmental and psychological. Evidence suggests that stress can trigger delusional disorder. Alcohol and drug abuse might also contribute to it. People who tend to be isolated, such as immigrants or those with poor sight and hearing, appear to be likely to have more delusional disorder.
There goes the Scots Irish in Appalachia.
How did that happen? A diagnosis of delusional disorder is made if the person has one or more delusions that last a month or longer, or 4 years or longer. That's editorializing. The person has never been diagnosed with schizophrenia, hallucinations, if they have them, are related to the themes of their delusions. Apart from the delusions and its effect, their life isn't really affected. Other behavior isn't bizarre or odd. That's why we see these motherfuckers at Hannaford's and voting.
And carrying guns.
Right.
Park.
Right. Manic or major depressive episodes, if they've happened, have been brief when compared with the delusions. And there isn't another mental disorder, medication, or medical condition to blame. How is delusional disorder treated, Jack? Well, you can use antipsychotics such as Thorazine and other antipsychotics. You can use atypical antipsychotics such as the frequently referred to on television Abilify or Latuda that I can't stop seeing commercials for, and others and other therapies like individual psychotherapy, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, or family therapy. What are the complications of delusion?
Seth, let me interrupt you here, because there's something that occurred to me when you're doing this list. Wasn't Prozac and Wellbutrin and all these serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs, weren't they really developed when all over a number of decades that mental illness became a social and less of an individual problem, but more of a social problem? It wasn't as addictive as Xanax and some of the psychotropic drugs, and that a large part of the population could be on them with very minimal side effects. Now, given that, which I think you agree with, are they going to look at this last decade and say, we have to start reevaluating the way we looked at psychology in general, because we've always looked at it as a clinical issue, okay? And in fact, the majority of psychological problems now are not individual based as much as socially based. And this pulls us back to, we talked about that every America has suffered some kind of post-trauma problem just from the school system.
Absolutely.
So
And the school system is designed to address a problem that doesn't exist in society anymore, but also doesn't exist to address the problems that are in society now that it itself has created, and it's a self-perpetuating bureaucracy.
So is not the future of psychology, to a large degree, number one, understanding this and setting up some kind of structure to deal with, and we should probably come up with a name for this phenomenon, okay? Because it is post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's post-education stress disorder. It's post-American culture stress.
It goes so to the soul of establishing one's value and self-worth.
Right, exactly right, which is so perverted by the American culture that you can only feel better about yourself if you squash somebody else.
You know, there's a reason that you and I love Chris Walker Spencer so much, and the reason is that he is a bright light in a sea of darkness.
I agree.
You know, we always think about this failed system of the American educational system, once again, that according to Sir Ken Robinson was conceptualized during the Age of Enlightenment. The idea of public education on demand was revolutionary. It was our founding fathers saying, every man should understand what Marcus Aurelius has taught us. Mm-hmm. Every man should read the classics. And boy, if every man read the classics, wouldn't society and culture be that much more wonderful? What a great world we could have escaping tyranny if the ideas of the Stoics and the ideas of the classics were available to everyone. And very inspirational.
And if you eliminated high school football at the same time. That's my
right. Okay. Right. No, I know that. But you know, you establish you have a concept which is created during the Age of Enlightenment and then applied to factory production in the Industrial Revolution, because that was the manifestation of how culture was growing, how society was expanding.
Is not any culture going to create an educational system that is going to have the same malaise that the culture does?
And the same inequities.
Yes, I agree.
And that those inequities will be built into the system.
Exactly, and reinforced and carried on through generation of generation, because it's society that created the educational system in its aspirational image.
Right, right. So now we're beginning to develop a understanding not only of the language, but of the context within which this cultural sickness developed.
You know something sad? Neither you and I, I'm sure, individual before we knew each other, were always interested in how things worked, including people. Yep. But really what triggered, and I think I can speak for you, which triggered us both into this journey into trying to understand, was Trumpism. Because it was such a vile, blatant threat and danger to everything we saw in life that we really started taking this analysis seriously. How the fuck can this happen?
Well, you know, that I think what you've just nailed to the wall, as if you were using a 4-penny nail and you were nailing it into a 2x6, is the fact that the biggest problem that we're having now is that we are confronting our own cultural denial that Western civilization causes mental illness.
Yep.
That Western civilization is flawed. It's not perfect. It causes mental illness. It is also a place where tremendous personal growth can happen.
Yes.
And the duality of those two circumstances is we're having a tremendously difficult time reconciling those two things, right? So the confrontation of cultural mental illness is a shock on top of the other shock of understanding that it's almost like the horror movie where the husband turns over and sees that the wife has been the ghastly vampire zombie the whole time, and he pulls the covers back, and her face is like the true face of horror, and yet he's been sleeping with her all these many years.
That happened to my cousin John. Don't laugh at that. It really did. Sorry.
Poor bastard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's happening to all of us.
Okay.
Noel is saying that he applauds Soren for sitting through this part of the show, even though I find it insightful. And Noel is saying, I can't fucking believe this kid at 16 years old is sitting in the chair, listening to this shit. I agree.
I talk, but I'm just very tired right now.
He has been teaching sailing or getting ready to teach sailing this summer. Okay. And so he's been outside all day. The $125 worth of sushi didn't do it. He is tired, and I understand that. So he's sort of wiped out. So we can be empathetic towards Soren.
I'm enjoying it.
Why are we going to be empathetic towards Soren? Why are we going to be empathetic towards Soren? You have just described the whitest person on the planet.
He is.
Soren
Seth.
Awesome. He says cabin boy. Awesome. Cabin boy.
No, he's not. His last name is Swedish. If you thought he was white before.
I know. That's the greatest thing ever. Soren happens to be like the nicest kid in the world.
Yep.
Who doesn't deserve to be that white,
Yes, we're all jealous of
that.
As if Soren wasn't white enough. He chooses to be locked in a room with a guy from Princeton.
It doesn't get whiter, even in Camden, Seth.
I'm telling you, the only thing that's missing is the Madras shorts and the Lacoste shirt, and he should be sporting a gin and tonic.
I told you about that guy I saw at the waterfront last summer that had a Costa shirt on that said Princeton Club, New York. I wanted to jump across the table and throw him into the water.
But not before stealing the shirt, though.
You talk about delusion. You walk into the Princeton.
Talk about condition. I mean, you what you're talking about is conditioned entitlement.
Yes. I love that expression. Conditioned entitlement.
Yeah, but now we're confronting all of these structures. Mm-hmm. Now that we're able to see them on our phones every day, and we're confronting all of these cultural and social structures, it's creating attention. I mean, CNN is running a special in, I think, 20 minutes about the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that we talked about earlier.
Right.
I don't know, but earlier offline.
Right.
And so are they, we're talking about reparations. Now we're talking about what the fuck do we do with all this, structural injustice? Not that we're in a position to do it.
Well, boy, that reparations thing, man, it's like transgender sports. It can go either way, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I am absolutely against transgender sports. Okay.
You and I both are, and that's because we are actual feminists.
Yes.
That is to say, neither you nor I are afraid of women. Rather, we advocate for women. That's because we're not fucking scumbags.
Well, beautifully put. What do you think, Noel? Does he have a way with language or what?
Or the Middle East.
Middle East, yes. The Middle East, that's something we could discuss for 2.5 minutes.
I said, Emma started to get into the whole, because it's really hip to be anti-Israeli now, because, of course, Bibi Netanyahu is a war criminal, right? So it's really, really hip for all the kids to be anti-Zionist right now when they see what the Israelis are doing to Gaza. And then you get a chance to see the Palestinians on TV doing their thing, and it re-levels the whole field.
You're talking about the ones in New York, or yeah, I know that really fucking pissed me off. Seth.
Celebrating beating Jews and asking who are the Jews.
Oh, please.
I'm ambivalent to your cause at best because I've forgotten about what scumbags you can be.
Mm-hmm.
Do yourself a favor and don't remind me to fucking hate you again.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Do yourself a favor and don't remind me that your tactics are idiotic.
Mm-hmm.
Don't remind me that the idea of peaceful protest never fucking occurred to you against the people on the planet who are the most susceptible to guilt ever.
They could guilt Israel out of existence if they just knew how to do it.
Yeah. There was a guy who wrote a book, and he was about, and the book was about Abraham, the father of monotheism. If you read the Old Testament and you study Abraham had two sons. Isaac, who the Christian Bible says Abraham was willing to sacrifice to God. But if you read the Quran, the Muslims believe that it was Ishmael that Abraham was going to sacrifice to God. And the difference between those two boys in the descriptions have been ascribed to the people of Israel and the Arabs. Isaac is described in the Old Testament as being compliant, reverential, worshipped his father, and was not an angry child. He was the lamb, right, in this equation. Ishmael, on the other hand, is described as being a pain in the ass who had his hand to everyone. In other words, slapping everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jewish author of this book cast these two peoples in that light. Go back to the root. You've got the Israelis who are the victims, who historically, this guy is implying would sacrifice 6 million people in the gas chambers for the creation of Israel. Or you have the Arabs who represent Ishmael, who is a prick bastard who just wants to fight all the time. And that's the way they perceive themselves in this part of the world.
So, once again, we're talking mass delusion. That reminded me that somebody pointed out that Baby Teeth, Matt Getz, looks like a cross between both Beavis and Butthead.
Does. He really does. How do you think that's going to go over in jail?
I think it's going to give him an opportunity to make friends with all sorts of different people.
So let me ask you this about jail, okay?
Yeah.
There are going to be charges coming. In between the time that we met last and now, it happened. Our friend Cy Vance convened a grand jury, and the grand jury is looking into criminal charges against Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Grand jury is going to, they're going to turn Alan Weisselberg, or they've already turned Weisselberg. And Donald Trump is going to be charged. And the January 6th commission is going to do its thing. And there's going to be a steady drumbeat of bad news for people with R after their names in parentheses.
Mm-hmm. We love those people.
And so my question for you, my friend, is of the 60% of Republicans that believe that Donald Trump is the legitimate president of the United States, what do these actions have impact-wise on the delusional population that we have just identified with our first tool in the Seth and Jack toolbox for defense against the dark arts?
The answer to that is none. But before we go there, Seth, before we go there, let me point out how unusual it is to have a 6-month grand jury, particularly when you've already collected 95% of all the evidence that you're going to need, and therefore you realize it's time to start the grand jury. And my only answer to that, there are a couple of them. One is obviously the midterms, which we could talk about. But even more importantly, how many people are going to be indicted? This isn't just Trump. This is a shitload of people, some of whom, like Weisselberg and his son, are going to look for a lighter sentence. And Giuliani, I think there are going to be people indicted. There's a reason this is so long. It's unusual, Seth. Usually it's a month, 1 or 2 days a week. This is huge in terms of its scope. And I think, what does that mean?
3 days a week.
Yeah. I think that means that the number of people that are going to be brought in is absolutely huge.
And I misspoke, and I apologize, Jack, and everybody else. I did misspeak when I talked about what the results of the grand jury were going to be. Excuse me. These are not super jurors. These are a different, this is from the same juror pool. But a grand jury doesn't need to be unanimous to get an indictment. A grand jury just needs to have a plurality to get an indictment. In other words,
I didn't know that. Interesting.
More than 50% of the people in the grand jury must vote for the indictment. And that's why when you go before a grand jury, what we can say, Jack, is that there is a 99% success rate in getting indictments.
And let me also point out, for those that aren't aware of it, when you go in front of a grand jury, you can't have a lawyer with you.
Yeah.
That is huge. Can you imagine Donald there without a lawyer?
No, well, I mean, you're not in jeopardy. You can't, you're not in, if you're testifying in a matter that doesn't involve you, you're not in jeopardy. If you can, if you're Rudy Giuliani,
yes.
You're making a deal before you get in the room.
Yes, true. But I mean, Seth, and and I say this every week, but I really mean it. We thought all the fun was going to be over when Biden became president.
No, I didn't. I knew it.
We're looking at a triage of America here that's going to be going on for decades. I'm sorry,
So when we're talking about treatments of delusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about the cultural impact and the cultural damage, the cultural trauma from Western civilization, the marginalized portions of our population on both sides of the equation.
True, but when I said that the effect of this, the effect of these trials on the Republican voting Trump bloc, and I said there are going to be none, I really mean that. Because it's pretty obvious at this point, is that in terms of any kind of medical solution to this group, information is not part of it.
Right. So my question for you, or my statement to you about that exact thing that you just said, is the only thing that could possibly have an impact is the advent of greater utilization of technology in the public space.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an observable truth, and there is a fantasy life. Emma, this show Catfish is so fascinating to me in the use of technology and how it matures. I'm watching it the other day. Guy calls them and says, listen, I have the best catfish episode you'll ever film. And the guy looked like Christian Slater in American Psycho, right? He's got the hair slicked back and he looks like a Wall Street guy. He's a waspy white guy, but he's got that like kooky look in his eye. Yeah, catfish and all. 100%. Emma binge watches it. I'm fascinated. This guy says, I'm in a relationship with somebody who's going to be, you're going to love this, he says. The person's famous who I'm in a relationship with, but I want you to prove that I'm in a relationship with her. Katy Perry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a relationship with Katy Perry. This person knows so much about Katy Perry, it can't not be her. Everybody watching the show is like, dude, you're not in a relationship with Katy Perry. Yeah, I am. Yeah, she's so smart. She's so much smarter than I am. She's so sophisticated. And it goes on like this for 3/4 of the episode. The catfish was in Gloucester, England. Very pretty blonde girl, a lesbian, doing this for shits and giggles. Strung this guy on for 3 years or 6 years or whatever the fuck it was. Having a relationship with Katy Perry. They do a little research. They confront the girl. She's gay. They introduce her to the guy. The guy says, so you say you're the one? She says, yeah. Tell me some things that I told you. And she starts telling him some of the things that only the person on the other end of the conversation. Nope, I don't believe it. This is a scam. I am in a relationship with Katy Perry. And the people on the crew are freaking out. But this guy was delusional. The idea that the show itself treated him as anything other than mentally ill was the telling part. That is how common delusion has become in Western civilization.
In the blues world, they would say somebody done hoodoo, the hoodoo man.
Yeah. Yeah. He got hoodoo. The hoodoo man got hoodoo.
The hoodoo man.
So my point about that, Jack, is that the only thing that I think is going to ameliorate this cultural delusion is the technology that spurned it in the first place. So the question that spun it in the first place. So my question is, or my conversation point is, hey, what happens when all of these charges are filed? What happens when it becomes demonstrably obvious that Donald Trump is the blonde chick in Gloucester?
Nothing. You have to understand, everybody thinks that everything is a lie. And they get to choose now. They get to choose for themselves what they want to call a lie and what they don't. And it's over. The thought process is over. The discussion is over. So nothing's going to happen. When Trump said that about shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue, it's exactly what it's become.
Well, my problem with this whole thing, Jack, is that the pressure in our society is not going away. If you drive on Route 95, on I-95, you will see the Trump trucks zipping in and out of traffic, aggressively driving. Yep. You'll see them trying to take it out on people. I gotta tell you, I've become an activist against expressions of rage in the public space against liberals. And I'm just not going to stop calling it out. In the dog park in Thomaston, people are starting to wear their guns in the dog park in Thomaston. We had my friend Tony had a gun brandished against him the other day.
You know, Seth, we used to decades ago talk about paranoia, and it was a serious mental issue.
Yeah.
Now, paranoia has become ubiquitous in the Trump community, and it's the victimhood. They've lied to us. They fucked with us. Trump won the election. But and that now is victimhood is the cultural equivalent now of what used to be the individual paranoia, which is very serious. It could lead people to do some very bad things. Now it is so easy for them and logical for them to see themselves as victims because they lost, they're losers, so they become victims. That now is the mass paranoia of the right.
And that's why every liberal and every black person in America should legally register to own a firearm.
Okay, and Noel said, it's like looking in the mirror and seeing a police car. You remember that line?
I don't know. No, where's that from?
Oh, it's from one of the songs of, wait, give me a second. Looking in the mirror and seeing a police car. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young? No, am I right?
Noel, is it CSN, Bubby? There's a delay in the comments, by the way, Jack.
Yeah, no, of course I understand that. This technology fucking with us again. And the delay in Thomaston is even worse. Yes, almost cut my hair.
Almost cut my hair.
Yeah.
Noel's great. We should have Noel on. Don't you think we should have Noel on as a guest next week?
I think we're going to have to. I mean, seriously, we got to give him some kind of kudos for being our only watcher.
I don't know. Maybe if we could design a Seth and Jack's show T-shirt, we should give it to my man.
I think that his name should be on it. He should be stuffed. Where's Ben?
Show with Noel in the audience.
Yes. Where's Ben? Where's Ben? We haven't heard from him. He's
not chiming in. I mean, where our numbers are going up, but Ben is next week. Noel, come on next week. I'll send you the link, baby. I'll send you the link. We got to talk to Noel from President Street.
Yes. Great.
Noel from President Street. First time, long time.
We used to have a lot of really cool guests, but they're not there anymore. I don't know why that is.
I asked Joe Ritter, I want to do a show on New York Conversations, Jack. Because Joe Ritter said the coolest thing the other day. He said, I went to go see Joey and the Ramones 20 times. And, of course, Joe is old enough to have gone to see Joey and the Ramones at CBGB's, like 20 times. And he was like, my favorite thing was after the show, just hanging out with Joey and talking. And the reason we were talking about it is because Joey Ramone and Dee Dee and all the guys in the Ramones were so obviously on the spectrum.
Right.
Obviously on the autism spectrum. And we want to talk about this theme of what does the Asperger brain have to do with modern society within the context of the punishment of the modern educational system that we were talking about before?
Well, I think success would be the first word that comes to mind. I mean, we're really watching the revenge of the nerds here to a certain degree, Seth.
We really are. Like in perpetuity. It's like an ongoing episode of Revenge of the Nerds. If Revenge of the Nerds was a daily episode that kept on fucking going on. Got a picture to show you, Jack. And and listen, I don't want you to react angrily when you see it, okay?
Yep.
Is that a deal? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Sorry.
Let me explain who the people in the picture are.
Well, they didn't tights, so they must be football players.
They are. The guy on the left is American white man icon and darling of evangelical Christians, Tim Tebow. Have you ever heard that name before, Jack? Tim Tebow?
I have, but that's all I know about him.
Tim Tebow is a uber religious guy. Tim Tebow happens to be an absolute role model, one of the kindest human beings on the face of the planet, and somebody that everybody should feel good about. He is a super nice guy. And you can't say a bad thing about Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was a quarterback. And Tim Tebow played for a guy named Urban Meyer, who now coaches the team that he's playing for. Jack, Tim Tebow has been out of football for 9 years. You know why?
No.
Because he sucked at playing football in the NFL.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. The guy on the right is a guy you may recognize as Colin Kaepernick.
I love him.
Now, Colin Kaepernick is a idol of the left. He is a political activist. He is the one that decided to take a knee during the national anthem and challenge the white power structure that ruled the NFL. And as a gesture of racial solidarity, because there is no justice for Black people in the United States, which is represented by our national anthem, he took a knee. And
that I'm aware of.
And he lost his position as a quarterback in the NFL. And do you know what Tim Tebow and Colin Kaepernick both have in common, aside from being football players?
Tell me.
Neither fucking one of them can play football in the NFL because they suck.
That's probably interesting for football fans.
However, last week, Tim Tebow signed an NFL contract to try out for the Jacksonville Jaguars after a 9-year absence from professional football. You know what that's tantamount to? That's tantamount to me at 280 pounds trying to compete in track and field in the Olympics.
In other words, it's not a good idea.
And Kaepernick, somebody says, Noel says Kaepernick wasn't that bad. That's the argument. As a quarterback, Kaepernick wasn't good enough to play quarterback in the National Football League. He had two, as Justin Holmes pointed out today, he had 2 3,000-yard years. He did go to a Super Bowl, I believe, or the playoffs, and performed poorly. He was not a good quarterback.
What does this have to do with anything?
Because there's a double standard here, but it's the same thing, okay? If you look at this picture and see 2 football players, you're missing the point. Tim Tebow is someone who shouldn't be playing football at all, but he is a darling of the evangelical right. Mm-hmm. And since he has been announced to play for the Jacksonville Jaguars, his jersey is #1 in sales on NFL.com.
Oh, shoot me.
As are the next 2 items, are Tim Tebow items.
I liked your malaprop, Seth. The evangelical white. Yeah. Kudos for that one, buddy.
Right. Colin Kaepernick is out of the NFL, and when NFL teams offered him a tryout, he blew that off. The reason that these 2 people are on the screen is not because of your football IQ. It's about your perception of fairness. And you thought that football IQ was an oxymoron.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm guilty. Guilty as charged.
I know. But the point is, Jack, is that this is the same thing from 2 different sides.
Yes.
And we have been given a tremendous gift.
Yes, I agree.
And Tim Tebow, these are not the same people, by the way. You know, Colin Kaepernick is not a perfect human. You know, they think Tim Tebow is an angel. Mm-hmm. Colin Kaepernick's not an angel.
No.
You know, he's an activist. He's the product of what he's gone through in life.
Sure.
Adopted, mixed race kid.
You know, that reminds me of an interesting story. Pat Tillman.
Great idea.
Now, Pat Tillman volunteered for the Army, even though he had huge money coming in as a football player. and he went to Afghanistan, and he was killed. He was shot, and in fact, if you read the
By
account,
America.
he was shot by his own guy. And the guy that shot him was some doofus goofball in the turret at the APC who said he wanted to get some, and so started shooting off. Tillman was very close to the enemy behind a rock, right? And he managed to nail the guy
Up a hill. And when you're shooting a saw or a 50,
Yep, that's what it was. Yep. But
bad
he
news.
wanted to get a piece of the action. He wanted to put some fucking lead in the air. Anyway,
Well, the reason that's interesting is because Pat Tillman was embraced by the jingoistic right as an icon of the way you live your life. He's a football player, which puts him squarely within the worldview that you prefer to attack, rightly, by the way, in many, many ways. And he was in the military, right? So he went to defend his country. Well, come to find out, the Tillmans are a liberal left Democratic family. And they didn't want to have any part of these flag-waving scumbags who eventually stormed the Capitol. Same people.
Yep.
Pat Tillman ideology, the Pat Tillman worshipers, same people that stormed the Capitol.
Now, let me ask you a question, which you just reminded me. Did you watch Paul Ryan's speech?
I did.
And what was your impression?
I had a couple of impressions. The first is that, yes, he is squarely placing. I mean, he's retired. He's got no skin in the game, and he's got nothing to lose. Zero to lose. And he knows what's going to happen. He knows what Jack knows and what Seth knows and what Soren knows. People are going to jail. It's going to end badly for this part of the Republican Party. And fuck them. Fuck them. Fuck them right in the ass. They suck. They have it coming. Good. Fuck them. Right?
Yep.
But Paul Ryan knows that, so he's positioning himself. It's dangerous to do. People are afraid of their physical well-being. And Donald Trump immediately attacks them. It's getting old, right? But Paul Ryan also, in his speech, idolized Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
The same Ronald Reagan that you met, the doddering old fool that couldn't string a sentence together at the end of his second term.
Mm-hmm.
The same guy that was not awake at the wheel when the malicious bastards fabricated Iran-Contra and then conned him into doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The same Ronald Reagan who was responsible for the greatest wealth disparity in human history. That Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to know that when he's giving a speech at the Reagan Library and he's, stroking Ronald Reagan as if he's the paradigm of virtue, hey, man, it's the same thing as idolizing Liz Cheney after she votes with Trump 93% of the time.
Well, when you're in that position now, Seth, and you feel you can't criticize Trump too directly, what you do is you turn to Ron Reagan. Okay, and it's sort of a safe move. You're only moving upon one square, rather than what should be done is castigating the Trump administration. You don't dare do that, so you basically, aspire to Ronald Reagan's politics.
Right. So he's trying to capture the part of the Republican Party and hope that the Trumpists can be redirected towards Reaganism.
Exactly. And what I admired about him, and I think the reason he's going to be successful at doing this as far as the party is concerned, maybe not the big picture, but he will be the leader of this faction, is because it has a wonderful way of cloaking his lies in classic Republican ideology.
Yeah.
Didn't you notice that?
I did. And the funny thing is that, it's an old playbook that worked before, right?
Right. Yep.
So I wonder if it would work again. I mean,
you remember when Biden tore him a new asshole in that vice presidential debate?
Yeah,
I have never loved Biden so much as I did that moment.
he's a funny guy.
He was brilliant.
I want to share a funny story with you. I went to see a client day before yesterday in Winthrop, which is on the other side of Augusta. And I'm driving back, and I invited Jessica to come with me. And we're driving, and we come to the part on 17 where you can turn off for Hussey's General Store.
Oh, my.
I said, Jessica, have you ever been to Hussey's? No. I said, honey, you got to have the experience. So we take the 5-minute detour. We go to Hussey's. She's having a great time. I go to the gun counter because that's what I love. I love guns.
Sure.
And I'm having a conversation with Jason, the manager of the gun department. And we get around to why people should have guns now. And he agrees it's getting crazy. And I said, yeah, it's getting crazy. I got people throwing racist messages on my lawn with coffee cups. People are driving in and out of traffic on 95. I said, these freaking conservatives are getting out of control. Have you noticed how angry they're getting?
Oh, Jesus.
And then the blank look on the face starts, and then like that dim smile.
Goats looking at thunder, right?
Goats looking at thunder. And then I say to him, I worked for Trump. You did? Yeah, you may have noticed by the accent. I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah, I noticed. I said, yeah, I worked at the Grand Hyatt in the late 80s. Really? I said, yeah, it was his first property. He's a fucking criminal. You know that, right? Jack, when you have an honest conversation with somebody who you've endeared yourself to by talking guns for half an hour, like differences in guns, what which manufacturer does, and then you establish a commonality of blood brothers, and then you tell him that his idol is a fucking crook. There was a moment of such clarity, of such perfect, ideal, beautiful recognition on his face that his world had just been shaken to its core.
Well, this is very Shakespearean, the idea that you elevate a person to their absolute height of it's like Trump, to the height of their aspirations, and then when you let them go, it's a long way down. So I think we're going to have to go down and socialize with Maggie and Michelle,
Of course.
So, but thanks for a great show, Daddy. Call me if you want a coffee up at some point.
Well, tomorrow's Saturday, so we're going to have to start breakfast again. I know we missed last week, but we got to figure out a place. This is outrageous.
I agree. And Boynton McKay is not going to reopen.
I know.
And
That's a little fuck to everybody, huh?
That's a tragedy of epic proportions.
Well, when you think about some of the people we might be forced to sit next to, maybe not. Okay, well, for Jack Churchill, this is Seth Silverton and Soren, our special third chair over there. Thank you, Soren. Good seeing you again, buddy. I will see you guys next week. Thanks. No. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See you, Seth.
Bye, buddy.